Everybody wants to quit their 9 to 5. Everybody wants financial freedom and everybody wants to be their own boss. But I didn't want any of those things when I set a goal to pay off $150,000 in 4 years. The word financial freedom wasn't a buzzword. Back in 2012, there were no IG influencers or YouTubers teaching us how to invest in a 401k and a Roth IRA to become a millionaire in my 30s. But I did it anyways. I paid off $150,000 in student loan debt in 4 years. Now, was I motivated every day to track my expenses? No. Was I super excited to put $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a month into my student loans every single month? Absolutely not. Most days I was unmotivated, I was uninspired, and to be honest, I was distracted. And when I tried to find things to motivate me, I came up empty because money, status, freedom, that stuff didn't really matter to me. That stuff didn't motivate me, at least not in my 20s. So I didn't rely on motivation. So how did I do it? How did I motivate myself to stay motivated, to pay $3,000 or $4,000 every month towards my debt, to live like a poor, broke college student, even with a 6-figure salary? And how did I make myself track my expenses consistently every day for 2 years? Well, the answer is simple. I went to work. I know it sounds like a really lame answer, but it's true. I went to work. And every day at work, I was surrounded by fear. And if I'm gonna be real honest, I was motivated by fear. Fear was my most powerful motivator because I was afraid of the person I would turn into one day because of my fear. I was afraid to be an unrecognized version of myself in 10 years because I had money problems, because I was broke, because I was poor, because I was stuck. And for those of you who don't work in medicine, let me tell you exactly what fear looks like from somebody with a medical background. When I would clock into work first thing in the morning, I would see fear disguised as a 63-year-old man. 3 days status post lobectomy, sitting alone in an ICU room without a single family member. Because he spent his entire life working nights, weekends, holidays, just to make money. And because he never had enough money, he wanted more money. So he neglected his wife and he didn't really develop any good relationship with his children. And so 40 years later, he's sitting alone, suffering in pain, with nothing but regret. And during my lunch break, fear would follow me into the break room. Fear was my 46-year-old PA colleague who would spend the entire lunch break complaining about how much she hated her life. She was living with her cheating ex-husband because she just couldn't afford to move out, to pay for her kids' tennis lesson, to contribute to her 401k, and to pay for rent all on her own. She was stuck living a life she didn't want. And in the late afternoon, fear would take on the form of a 34-year-old man who was a frequent flyer in the urgent care. He was suffering from chronic back pain, chronic leg pain, and he came in regularly to get his Toradol shot. Just enough to get him that quick fix so that he was able to go back to work tomorrow. And to be honest, we never really treated his pain. Not really. We just gave him a quick band-aid because that's all he wanted. He couldn't afford the help that was prescribed to him. He couldn't afford to take 3 weeks to get some rest, to not go to work, and to go to physical therapy. He couldn't afford that. And because he was suffering from chronic pain, he was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, and worse, NSAID, a lot of it. And because his chronic pain was developing, he had really bad, untreated anxiety and depression. But again, we couldn't treat that because he couldn't afford the treatment. And before I would leave for my shift, I would recognize fear. As a mother, a struggling working mom who was a lawyer earning a respectable salary, but living paycheck to paycheck. She couldn't catch a break between 2 kids, a mountain of household work, and crazy work deadlines. And all she wanted from me, from the clinician, she just wanted me to leave her alone in a dark, empty room so she can sleep in my urgent care gurney for an extra 2 hours just to have some peace and quiet. Because she didn't want to go home and she couldn't afford a nanny to help watch her kids. She couldn't afford a cleaner to do the housework. And she couldn't afford an assistant to help her with all of her work stuff. So she came in to the urgent care so that we treat her so that she was a patient and she didn't have to be super mom. You see, after 10 years in clinical medicine, I realized one single thing. Most people's medical problems are rarely just medical problems. They are money problems disguised as medical problems. Uncontrolled hypertension, well, the patient isn't taking his medication because he can't afford it. Necrosis of the nipple from a recent breast augmentation surgery, well, the patient went to a foreign country, got a really bad boob job, and now has complete necrosis of her entire nipple. And think about it. That patient with the excessive weight gain that can't lose the weight, it's because the patient has untreated hypothyroidism for years, but she was never able to make time to go see the doctor because she didn't have enough PTO days. I was in my late 20s when I realized this. Man, these people are miserable. Adults are miserable, and that's gonna be me in 10 or 15 years if I don't take care of my finances. I really just didn't want to stress about money, and I didn't want to earn a six-figure income and still have to live paycheck to paycheck because I see that all the freaking time. And I just don't want to have these terrible medical problems that turn into much bigger chronic issues because I couldn't afford to fix them early on. And when I was seeing all these unhappy, miserable patients coming through my clinic every day, I had a light bulb moment. I realized I don't want to be poor. I don't want to worry about asking my boss if I can have some time off to go see the doctor. I don't want to not be able to have money where I can just move out and leave my husband if he's cheating on me or if I was in a abusive relationship. These things, we look at them and we think they're really small things, but in fact, they're really big things. So every day when I felt like I was just unmotivated to pay off my debt or I didn't want to track my expenses, I would just stare at these people in my clinic and I would use their misery as motivation to do better. I know it sounds really bad, but I just didn't want to be any one of them. I didn't want to make their mistakes. I didn't want to live their lives. And I didn't want money to control my life. I didn't want my debt to make decisions for me. And that was how I stay motivated. It sounds awful. I know it sounds really awful. But when I think about the people that came into my clinic, when I saw their behaviors and their problems, somehow I realized I was almost normalizing their behaviors. Like it was normal to be in debt and have all these problems. But the reality is it's not normal. We humans shouldn't live this life. We shouldn't be struggling. We shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck and making big life decisions based on money. That's the worst kind of life to live. So when people want motivation, like an inspiring speech or a tool or a software or an app to help them not spend money, to help them manage their finances, I think the truth is the biggest motivator is just looking in the mirror and just realize the person you don't want to become. Knowing what you want is really important, but it's equally important to know the person you don't want to become. And for me, I didn't want to become a person that was controlled by money. And that was my biggest motivation, paying off my debt.